Buckle up, dudes. We're taking a high-stakes joyride today on AniMay18, your daily dose of anime every day in May. I'm of course referring to the 2006 sci-fi adventure, Eureka 7. I'm probably gonna ruffle a few feathers here, but I'm not a fan of mech shows. Don't get me wrong, I like a good robot design and they can be really versatile characters, but any kind of piloted vehicle just doesn't get me invested. Maybe it feels like there's a layer of detachment when something exciting is happening and it has to keep cutting back to people sitting in a cockpit as opposed to physically being involved in the fight. As such, Eureka 7 and its surfing mech fighters were already at a disadvantage for me, but I watched and loved both seasons of Code Geass, so who can say. They even both have OPs by Flow, which really took me back. Eureka opens with our boy Renton Thurston bemoaning his boring life and dreaming of one day honing his hoverboard skills and catching some sweet air with his idols the Gecko State, a ragtag group of famous boarders/mercenaries. Renton is unpopular, whiny, entitled, and sad about stuff. You know, your typical 14-year-old, until a giant mech crash lands on top of his house. Instead of spiraling into depression at the loss of all his possessions, he falls madly in love with the mech's pilot, the mysterious girl Eureka. What he sees in her, I'll never know. That freaky, piercing gaze is enough to give me the willies. Turns out Eureka is part of the Gecko State, and their captain, Renton's hero, Holland, has deep connections to Renton's grandfather, his late father, and possibly his long-lost sister. After destroying more of their property, Renton decides to join them, as if he has a home to go back to, and cruise around doing odd jobs and catching the next gnarly current. Fair enough setup for what amounts to an episodic comedy action show about a bunch of sci-fi rebels, which I kind of enjoyed, but was initially turned off by the gravitas given to this 3-episode arc. We see Renton in his day-to-day and sympathize with his plight of having basically no friends or family. His solitary goal is to get good enough to do a cutback drop turn and join the ranks of Gecko State. We don't have an estimation of how lofty these goals are, but we see that Holland is more or less a celebrity icon and Renton can barely get his board off the ground. It's a strong setup that makes me believe that this opening will be about Renton improving his skills over time, meeting some like-minded characters at his level, and maybe joining a competition where he has an opportunity to impress Holland or something. Nope, you're not allowed to board anymore. Oops, your house was destroyed. Now what? Kind of a minor complaint, but the sci-fi explanation for how these hoverboards work are that you can gain lift off invisible, or maybe they're visible sometimes, waves of transparent light particles, which everyone calls TRAPARs, which just sounds horrible.
Transparent light particles, TRAPARs for short.
If you want to shorten it, why not call them transpars? You know, transparent particles? Sounds way better and has the same syllables. I'm just going to call them that from now on. So anyway, Renton meets this mysterious girl, and it turns out she was piloting an LFO, basically a mech for surfing transpars, which just so happens to be the original LFO, the Nervash Type 0, that was the model for every LFO that would later be produced. And even though it's the first one, it's by far the fastest and strongest and coolest. Go figure. And with this thingamajig and my dad's secret attachment-a-jigger, we can fly even more the bester! Yeah, cool. So then, in the second episode, Renton jumps his bike off a cliff to deliver the what's-it to Eureka, and through sheer force of infatuation, masters the cutback drop turn and saves the day from the authorities pursuing them. And it's treated like this big triumphant moment with music swells and everything, but I felt nothing. I felt robbed of any sense of character growth or even a modicum of suspense. In the single episode after this, Team Gecko is dogged by a military guy, and in 1 second, the Nervash comes in and kills everybody and the Gecko ship flies away. And they all react like, how could a single unit take out 3 military LFOs and get away with it? Like, what kind of stakes am I supposed to feel when there's obviously no threat? This persistent lack of suspense continues as the team intentionally flies in the face of danger just to ride some sweet lifts, but by then I had accepted that this show has the drama and emotional stakes of an episode of Rocket Power. We don't lift for money, man! Too many shoobies! I could at least appreciate the action scenes for being well-directed and fun to watch, mostly because the pretty green energy trails look cool and are well-animated. A number of the Gecko State members have okay designs, and Holland is a pretty cool guy, but I know most of the supporting cast doesn't even matter. This is the kind of action show where the good guys win because they believe harder than the bad guys. If we trust each other and put out enough positive energy, there's no way we can lose. It's all thanks to sci-fi robot magic I got from my daddy. What a crock. Even the warm embrace of awkward teen romance, my favorite, can't draw me into this world. It also has that storytelling technique I hate where the first third of the story is where the protagonist has to prove themselves. and everyone just hazes and ridicules them incessantly until they do something cool, and eventually everyone loves them and they have no faults. Kinda makes the opening feel so much worse and the whole cast look like a bunch of hypocrites. I know you gotta have some kind of progression, but especially when the protagonist has no support group or their friends are the ones to be rating them, it totally turns me off. You can have characters grow closer without everyone starting on negative terms. There's just nothing about Eureka 7 that catches my attention. And from what I've read, the story just feels like a bunch of filler until the last 10 or so episodes. And that's a big no thank you. With characters I don't really care about, mech-based action that kind of uninterests me, and a roundabout story with a lot of power of love translating to battle prowess, Eureka 7 is a dish I can't bring myself to swallow. And for the love of God, just call them transpars! Whoa, I guess we kinda beefed it out there today, but the surf's always choice during AniMay18. So I'll catch you later.